Thank you, .x, another recurring sponsor this year. Great video as always, everyone. So we are in our second session, and we have, so it was even just mentioned in the last session, right? Trademarks and legal, right? I think it's a common one discussed during the any domain conference, and we're always a pleasure to have Tom here. Tom Barrett from Encirca, who's an expert on this and has shared over the years in our community and many others about this. And Chango, we all know Chango Unchained. She had a little tech issue. I don't know if it's working now. Chango, do you hear us, or any luck? I hear the clicking.
That might be me.
Oh, that might be you. Okay. Well, I think you can test that, Chango, but Tom did prepare some slides to get started. If everybody can bring their questions, we should also try to learn the Q&A tab. If people can learn the Q&A tab, there's a question tab under the chat box. You can leave your questions there, and we can try to get to those towards the end of the session. But Tom, if you want to take it away, we'll begin.
Yeah, let me just bring up the slides here. If I can do that. Awesome. All right. You can see my PowerPoint slide?
Yeah, I see the slides.
All right, cool. Hey, everybody. Happy to be here for my third or fourth time. So the topic I was asked to present on today is called Navigating Legal and Trademark Safeguards for Web3 Domain Investments. And this is an interesting topic. I'm going to focus on the word investments here because, like all of you, we've invested several years in time, sweat, buying names, writing software, and it's still labeled as an experiment, as are some other Web3 projects. And so when I hear the word investments, though, I hear that maybe we want to move from experimentation to monetization, and perhaps starting to see a return on the investments we've made over these past few years. So a little bit about myself, and is it Nick? Quick sound check, Michael. Everything okay?
Yep, I put mute on, but I hear you loud and clear, and I think others are hearing you too.
Sweet. So if you guys don't know me, I run two ICANN domain name registrars, Encirca and Nameshare. I focus on providing really custom retail solutions for a variety of regulated top-level domains like .bank, .cpa, .realtor, .med, .post is what I'm relaunching right now. Very active in the ICANN community since its formation back in 1998. Active today on the Name Collision Advisory Project, which I'm not going to talk about today. Also on their nominating committee to appoint half of their board. Also active in the trademark community. So although I'm not a trademark lawyer, I've built internet businesses for trademark lawyers, and I lead the Web3 efforts at the International Trademark Association, and very active in a variety of Web3 projects, from Handshake to ENS to some trademark protection. Just a quick note, I'm not going to talk about collisions, but as many of you may know, I did help serve as the intermediary a month or two ago to get .music TLD into the hands of the ICANN registry operator. I did that free as a public service, basically. And I know there's a few other ICANN TLDs that have not been reserved and are out in the wild. And so happy to help find those to be in the hands of the ICANN registry operator if anyone's interested. So as I said, I think there's a mindset shift here from experimentation to commercialization. When we talk about the word investment, it means that we want to monetize that. We want to see some sort of exit, perhaps to create some generational wealth. And so and this is certainly part of my journey as well, because I've invested a lot in different Web3 projects. And so I want to bring you along to where I am in terms of an investment thesis for Web3. And it may throw cold water on some of what you're thinking, but I think it's practical and realistic at this point. So again, I've been doing this since 1995, when I launched a business targeting trademark lawyers. And the internet, as all of you know, is built on the DNS. Nothing works without a stable and secure DNS. And the DNS actually is maintained, in terms of the standards, is maintained by the Internet Engineering Task Force, or IETF. And they are basically the folks that ensure there's a predictable, stable, and secure internet. Okay, that's the DNS. So it turns out that DNS is the glue that also makes Web3 possible. So we've heard about this word soup of what is Web3, from free speech to trustless, digital identity, self-sovereign, unstoppable. Ownership shall not be infringed. That's from the ENS DAO Constitution. Uncensorable, right? So all this Web3 stuff are the ideals that spawned experiments like Handshake and ENS and a bunch of other projects. But the reality is, all those Web3 investments are not replacing the DNS. They're not an alternative. They're basically simply extending the DNS. And this is where, some of you may differ, but I believe that the next version of the utility for Web3 are going to be an extension of what you can do today with a Web2 domain name. So it's an extension, and because we already have an engineering body out there, they are working on what they call responsible DNS integration to Web3. And so in terms of my investment thesis, I'm interested in how we can extend the current DNS and leverage some of the utility from Web3. So this is just a quick side here. So what does it mean to extend the DNS? It means, first of all, don't abuse the DNS, right? So here's a definition of DNS abuse that I think is very important in terms of my investment thesis, because I don't want to invest in projects that encourage or are prone to DNS abuse. So DNS abuse is any activity that makes or intend to make use of domain names, the DNS, or any digital identifiers, i.e. Web3, that are similar in form or function to domain names, to carry out deceptive, malicious, or illegal activity. All right. So deceptive, malicious, and illegal activity. So I don't want to be part of a project where that is prevalent. This, by the way, is a definition put out by the Trademark Association last year. It obviously includes cyber squatting, trademark infringement, as well as other forms of DNS abuse. So the key message here is that the reason why the internet community is so concerned about DNS abuse is that it's a public safety issue. And public safety really trumps anything else that you might want to do. If you think back to that word soup I showed earlier about unstoppable and self-sovereign and trustless, free speech, all that is really trumped if it somehow endangers public safety, right? So successful investments in Web3, I believe, are going to be in projects that address or avoid deceptive, malicious, or illegal activity. So free speech has its limits, right? The idea of the Web3 being uncensorable or unstoppable, that has limits. You can't yell fire in a crowded theater. So what does that mean from an investment thesis? In my mind, we're not going to get to true decentralization. There's no such thing as being truly uncensorable or truly unstoppable. And in fact, Unstoppable Domains is finally realizing this as well. And the whole idea that ownership shall not be infringed, that's fine to a point. But if it starts to endanger public safety, then it's not going to be realized. So here's an example of what I call DNS abuse. You may be familiar with a kids game called Roblox, right? When I grew up, I played with Lincoln Logs. When my kids grew up, they played with Lego. Kids nowadays play with Roblox, right? So it's an online building game really aimed at 5, 6, 7-year-old kids. Okay. Very successful business. So let's look at what happens on Handshake for Roblox. So I have a search engine where I look at all the Handshake names, and I do the same for ENS and Unstoppable. And I know you can't read this, but there's several hundred names in Handshake that contain Roblox. So, for example, the first one here is Roblox porn. There's Roblox scripts by Roblox. Right? Roblox games, Roblox fans, Roblox core, etc. And this goes on for pages. Now, don't forget the audience for Roblox are 6, 7, 8-year-old kids. Okay. So this is an example of DNS abuse. It's not the exact trademark, which maybe they claimed, or maybe it's on auction. We don't know. But these are variants that are intended to deceive or mislead the public. In this case, kids. All right. And so obviously I don't have these names, but if you're associated, just being part of the community, this is not good for the project. And it's not limited to Handshake. The same problem exists with the Ethereum naming service, .eth. The same problem exists with the 10 or 12 unstoppable domains, TLDs. They all have this problem where there's a segment of the community that is really doing DNS abuse and endangering, in many cases, kids or the public in doing so. And so the investment thesis has to be, well, if I want to see I want to commercialize or monetize my investment, this is not good. If I want to see a 10x exit on my investment, right? This needs to be fixed. And I can go on Tesla, hundreds of Handshake TLDs containing Tesla. Google, hundreds of TLDs containing Google. All these really intended to impersonate another company, right? So it's part of what I think is unacceptable use of Web3 domains. So my investment thesis is I want to follow some standards for responsible DNS integration. I think that the successful Web3 naming projects will support public safety by addressing DNS abuse. And we already see it happening in several areas. Namebase, which obviously operates the largest Handshake registry, they are incorporating the uniform domain name dispute policy into all their TLDs. So they realize that if they're going to realize a return on their investment, they have to address DNS abuse for the Handshake TLDs that they are managing. Unstoppable domains. I saw them last week at the ICANN meeting. They plan to apply to be ICANN accredited. They plan to incorporate into their smart contract a dispute process. So you're seeing this pivot of people saying, we want to be successful with our investments. And the only way to get there is by cleaning up our namespace and making this safe for the public to use. There's a potential Web3 dispute process. This is just a high-level design. I don't want to get into that. But my final point is, from an investment thesis, I think Web3 investors, if they want to see a return on their investment, they have to start getting pragmatic. The ideals of the lab experiment have to be somewhat curtailed if you want to see this gain mainstream acceptance. So I'll stop there. Happy to talk about specific trademark questions and give Chang. to talk as well.
Yeah, hey Tom, those are some excellent points, and I think so. There's actually the way that we do it in Web3 to authenticate names, which is like on Solana, for example. There's a bunch of Solana shitters, and then it's just like you could have Dolan, Trump, Donald Trump, MAGA token, Rich, Nick, Nick with a C, Nick with a CK, all of these tokens. But then the authoritative part of it is the contract address. So we actually do have this like phishing resistant primitive directly on the blockchain already. It's a matter of building a layer on top of it, kind of like a UI layer or some kind of social layer that orchestrates and acts as the authoritative layer to let people know which is the true name. Like the same primitive exists on Handshake. So there is like a verifiable way on chain for people to understand which is the true name and which is like some derivative, like probably phishing name. So I think that like we need to build some kind of like a knowledge bridge for people in Web 2 to understand how it works in Web 3, and for Web 3 to build that orchestration layer for people to understand which is, which names have like a little social check mark and which are not.
Yeah, that's a great, yeah. So the Web 2 dispute process may not be fit to purpose here. There may be other reputational mechanisms that make sense. I'm all for that.
Yeah.
But I'm having to think in terms of my investment thesis. I think the most likely path to success or acceptance by the mainstream is something that allows trademark owners and other types of DNS abuse to be addressed, so it becomes trusted by consumers.
Yeah, definitely. There's got to be a lot of social coordination work between the two, basically like the two different verses, because we like I think like Web 2 and Web 3 people live in like different servers, like we're in different metaverses, and there needs to be I think between you and me, Tom, we're kind of like the de facto bridges between these two worlds. You're kind of the Web 2 advocate teaching Web 3 to the ICANN people and traditional domainers, and me, I'm kind of like dabbling, trying to go to your events and like speak to traditional domainers to understand where your head is at, and so that we in Web3 can speak the same language.
Absolutely, yeah. So I mean, there's a lot of quotes here. People don't want to bring Web 2 law to Web 3. It's one internet, guys, and it all runs on DNS. There is nothing where you can avoid jurisdictions or legal issues. If they want to, they will come after Web3. Right. So far, they have not been concerned. I mentioned I was on the names collision project at ICANN. As far as they're concerned, there are no collisions. They don't exist. They will go. It's interesting. In the next round, there'll probably be maybe 1,000 or 2,000 new TLDs. I can tell you 100% of those will collide with Web3 TLDs. But, Handshake will have 12, 15 million by then, and it's not going to be material to Handshake. But those 1,000 to 2,000 ICANN TLDs will get recognized in all the browsers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a project called D3, and they're doing that work to bridge between the two. But then I think that the work that they're doing is important because they're actually getting the opt-in from Web3 names such that they could register in ICANN and for it to work on both, so that there's no collision. So I think this type of pioneering is needed in the Web3 space to work with ICANN, right? And to and it's important for Handshake as well to be recognized as a legitimate project in the eyes of ICANN, which is the incumbent. So, having conversations like these is important, and I think we all understand that it's not just the Wild West anymore. We have to work with the incumbent system. Also, funny story about dot music. So I was talking to Constantine, and he was so upset. I was talking with him and Paul Stahara from Donuts, for the owner of .io and hundreds of other TLDs. And then Constantine was so upset about music, and we were like, okay, like let's look for the owner for you, right? So then we did like a crowdsourced search in the Handshake community to figure out who the owner was. He was anonymous, and then and then at some point, Constantine, because he needed to do taxes and reporting in the U.S., he needed some legal custodian in order to like arbitrate that deal, because he couldn't just directly use crypto to buy that domain, right? There were a lot of other legal hurdles he had to jump through. And so that effort took multiple months until Tom, you came in and kind of saved the day, because you were able to act as that bridge. But hopefully that's one giant collision that's been resolved now. And I think that was the main one. Hopefully there's not more.
Yes. And so, collisions are interesting. As I say, the way ICANN measures collisions, it's traffic at what they call the root servers. So a lot of the Web3 projects don't appear on the radar at all when they look at collisions. So they'll have to come up with a different metric to determine if there's a collision. And certainly collisions between different Web3 projects, they don't care. They don't care about that at all. Right.
And that's why it's up to us to resolve those collisions within our own domain as well.
Yeah. So I'm looking at the chat here. The last comment by John is, why doesn't Google resolve HNS domains? And I think I tried to address that. It's a public safety issue. They do not, any more than why ISPs are not going to let you resolve Web3 domains. This is we already have seen some people may be aware that people are dying of counterfeit drugs, right? Drugs that they think is a painkiller, it's laced with fentanyl, what have you. And so that's an extreme case, obviously, but the public safety issue is at top of mind. And so folks like Google, like Cloudflare, they need to be assured, their investors need to be assured that consumers and the public are not going to be harmed if they start resolving these things.
I mean, I think we've also learned this money thing too, right? I'm not certain. A lot of them need payment for integrations. I'm not saying those specifically, but some browsers are. Their monetization model, I've learned, is payment for integrations as well.
Yeah, and the other thing is I mean, so to people in the, I guess, the traditional domain space, Handshake looks like it's dangerous, but in fact, when you dig into what it looks like technically, it's actually more secure, safer than any Web 2 domain, any people who are signing with SSH keys and all that, like 10 24 RSA keys and all that. It's like way less secure from a technical standpoint. It's just a matter of educating people in the traditional domain side to understand that this technology is much more sophisticated than because it's like one of those things. It's like, oh, the unknown, right? So the scary thing is like, well, this is not something that I understand. Therefore, I think that it may be, perceive it as less safe than what I'm used to. When objectively, that's not the case. So it's a question of us in the Web3 space being able to educate people in the Web 2 space and doing that kind of outreach. Unfortunately, Unstoppable Domains actually is like one company that does recognize the importance of doing this work a lot, which is why they're doing so much like lobbying of the Web 2 space. More of that needs to be done from Handshake. The only downside with Handshake is it's completely decentralized, and so it's like a multi-headed hydra where many of us come at your the ICANN conferences from many different angles, and you don't actually know who the leader is. That's by design, and that's the trade-off. but strictly speaking, Handshake is actually more secure and robust from like at the protocol level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's it's an exciting project. It still has, I think, a ways to go before it gains some acceptance. But it's been a fun ride so far.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of those things where, people in the Handshake community are trying to lobby, traditional domain, like people who own, large TLDs, like .io to update their keys to like 2048-bit keys, right? So that's going to be safer. And that way it also allows people to use Dane and resolve Handshake names directly in the browser without needing any sort of like high overhead from like integrations from like browser integrations that are like pay to play, but that's like a very long-term game.
Yeah, and I know I saw that question flash up on the screen. I know we're running out of time, but I would go back to my real simple definition of DNS abuse. There are a lot of dictionary words out there that are obviously trademarked and for particular goods and services. As long as your intent is not malicious, deceptive, or misleading, and it's a dictionary word, you're using it in a descriptive sense, you are safe. But as soon as you start to try to impersonate or mislead anyone, then you've got a DNS abuse issue. So if you have a famous trademark combined with the word corporation or support, I heard someone say Microsoft support. Don't touch that. That's not a great idea. You're clearly the only intended use of that is to impersonate Microsoft support. Why do you think that's good for the project? It really isn't.
Yeah, it's not. I think some people think it's funny. There is some fun. I mean, some people, but it's not. We have to mature as a community. I think. I think earlier, the first couple of years, there was a lot of fun that was being done, but it's not really. Yeah, I mean, that's. Of course, it sounds funny to me. I kind of chuckle, but yeah, I mean, it could obviously be used for bad things, like tricking people. A lot of people don't know how to use the internet. People don't even know how to use Google or Amazon, right? They just click the first ad and they just buy. A lot of bad stuff happens on Twitter ads, you can see, or Google ads. People click the ad and they connect their wallet and get drained because they think it's another. People are not as smart as we think. So we just got to be careful about what we do as a community.
And I can tell you, the rug pulls that we've seen with crypto has really made consumers skittish about getting a wallet, about going through that whole process of buying crypto. And so I'm really focused on onboarding newcomers, and these are hurdles, serious hurdles to overcome if we want to see larger acceptance. Agreed.
I mean, Bitcoin. Everyone's talking about Bitcoin. I mean, Bitcoin was 2008, right? It came out.
Yeah.
I mean, it took a long time. I mean, it was still 4 years for Handshake. I think some people will be sharing about that later in some of the sessions, but it takes time, especially in such a decentralized form. But I think the main point of the session is, please, everyone, just try to respect trademarks. I know maybe you can get away with it. You can squat on these names or, et cetera, and try to, but
you're wasting money because they're never going to buy these names. They would rather spend several $100,000 trying to track you down than give you $1,000. And that's the reality. So it's not a good investment. So I know there's been a lot of questions in here. I'm going to throw my email address in the chat. If you got a specific question, I'll be happy to correspond with you via email.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. I always appreciate you. I think it has been every single year you've shared here. So, and you're active in a lot of the events that I see online in Web2 and Web3. So I appreciate your work to try to keep these two bridged. And
well, it's fun. We'll see you guys around.
All right. Thanks, Tom. And thank you, Chango. It's been fun. Tony Montana in the back with your shades. You'll also be on the auction in a couple of days too. I always enjoy it.
You guys look great.
Yeah. we're having fun, you know. We gotta have some fun here.
Wow, 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 yippee yo, yippee yay! It's the Wild Wild West.